Welcome parents and students of the Mary Lewis Academy. My name is Nick and I am the owner of Curvebreakers Test Prep. We are the company that is partnering with your school for after-school, in-school SAT prep classes. I'm really excited to forge this new partnership. I think it's going to be amazing for the parents and students of the school, and I'm super excited to work with the students on their SAT prep. But today what I'm talking about is the difference between the SAT and ACT. I'm going to break it down for all of you. I'm going to go through the biggest differences, also some of the smaller differences, and really try to end this presentation by giving you some questions to ask yourself to decide whether the SAT or ACT is better for you. So I just want to give you a background on what sections there are on each test. So the SAT and ACT both have 4 sections. Let's go over the SAT first. So the SAT has 4 sections, the first being reading comprehension. Then you have writing and language, which is basically a grammar and writing style test. Then you have math without a calculator, and then you have math with a calculator. On the ACT, you also have 4 sections, but they are in a different order. So first off, you have English, which is once again a grammar and writing style test. Then you have the math section. You do get a calculator the entire time. Then you have reading comprehension, and then you have science, which of course is not a test of scientific knowledge, but more of reading and analyzing graphs and a study in a scientific context. So very different content on the 2 tests, and the biggest thing to point out in the beginning would be that the SAT is 50% math and the ACT is only 25% math. So you can make your own determinations as to what that would mean. Basically, if you feel pretty strongly in math, you feel somewhat comfortable in math, the SAT is great. If you feel really, really uncomfortable in math, you might want to look at the ACT, but that said, there's a host of other factors that come into play. The SAT is scored out of 1600. Both sections of the test are out of 800, so the math part is graded out of 800, and the what's called evidence-based reading and writing, so the English portion, is also graded out of 800. Those two, you add them together, and you get your score out of 1600. For the ACT, each section is individually graded out of 36, and what you do to get your composite score on the ACT is you average the 4 sections together. That brings in a concept of decimal point scoring. So basically you could get a 27.25 on the ACT. In that instance, it would round down. If you get a 27.5, that would round up to a 28. So that's a bit of an advantage for the ACT. Beyond that, the other huge difference is the timing. On the SAT, you get pretty much ample time for questions. On the ACT, you do not get a lot of time. So on the ACT, it's going to feel extremely rushed, whereas the SAT may feel more relaxed. So if you feel like you don't read as quickly as you would like, or you don't make quick decisions, the ACT is going to be very difficult. If you do feel like that's a strength of yours, then the ACT might be right up your alley. Now, how should we make this determination as to what test is better for you? Well, I know that a majority of the students in your school have taken the PSAT and the pre-ACT. So what you really should do is take those 2 scores, analyze them, and determine which one is better for you. If they're in the same ballpark, which is going to be the case for many, many students, you want to think about your own skills. Like I said, if you feel like time management is not a strength of yours, you're probably going to want to look at the SAT. Also, if you feel comfortable in math, you also want to look at the SAT. If you feel like you're someone that moves very quickly and you can make quick decisions, then the ACT would probably be a better test for you. All that considered, colleges will not have a preference either way. All they're going to be looking at is which one is the highest. As you know, many schools are test optional now. Basically, the case is if your score is high or within the range that the school would want, then you probably want to send it in. If it's below that range, then you probably don't. So all we're looking for out of the SAT and ACT is which test is better for you, which test will produce a score that will be in the range that they want, and then you will be successful. There also are several minute differences between the sections that can help you make your determination even better. For the math component, as I stated, the SAT has more math than the ACT, but the SAT is going to be heavily based on algebra and algebra 2, whereas the ACT is going to have more geometry. So if you feel like you're not strong in geometry, you probably would not want to take the ACT. If you feel like you are a little bit better at algebra, that's going to lean more towards SAT. The English portions, luckily, are very, very similar, though they're pretty much identical, especially in the grammar portion. The big difference in the reading portion is that the SAT has a common core question style called an evidence-based question. So basically, on that portion of the test, you're asked a question, which might be, what is the author's main point? And then you're asked to produce the evidence for that question in the next question. So the next question will be, which one of these answer choices is the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? As you can tell, it's a bit confusing. Many students find those to be difficult. Others find those to be very easy because they're basically telling you the answer to the previous question is in one of these 4 lines. You just have to find out which one. With the right strategy, with the right approach, that can be very doable. If you do not have the proper strategy, it's probably going to be pretty difficult. The other big difference is this science part. The ACT does have a science section. Like I said, you're going to have to read graphs and charts. I'll put up a little diagram of what one of those looks like on the screen right now so you can kind of see. I find that section to be very learnable. The thing is, if you feel uncomfortable with scientific vocabulary and scientific content, then it's going to be a little bit difficult. Also, there is a big learning curve. It is a totally new exercise, so students that do that for the first time, they may not do well because they just don't know how to do that kind of task. It's totally new, right? You've done math questions, you've done reading comp, you've probably done some grammar questions in your life, but you may have not done this kind of science task, so that's why it's a bit difficult at first, but you can overcome it. Lastly, I wanted to touch a bit more on the timing component of the 2 tests. As I mentioned, the ACT you get very little time, and on the SAT you get more time. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, on the reading comp section, on the ACT for 10 questions, you get 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage. On the SAT for 10 or 11 questions, you get 13 minutes per passage. So a full 4 minutes and change more time to do a reading passage on the SAT than on the ACT. Now, for some students, that is a huge deal breaker. It pushes them towards the SAT. Other students are able to move more quickly and are able to complete the reading comprehension passages within the timing of the ACT. I would say if you're looking at your diagnostic reports from the PSAT or the pre-ACT and you see that you've run out of time on a lot of the questions on the ACT, or you didn't finish a few of the passages, you probably want to look at the SAT or give that a stronger look. If you were able to finish it all, then both tests are probably in play. Let's touch a little bit on what classes will be like for the SAT or ACT. For Curvebreakers, personally, what we do is focus on the 3 core components of standardized tests. Number 1 would be the strategy. You have to know how to take the test. You have to know the tricks, the tips, and you have to know a methodology to go about the exam. Number 2, you have to learn the content. So you need to know the formulas, you need to know the grammar rules, all that good stuff so that you're not leaving any questions behind for silly reasons. Thirdly, you need the practice. So there's going to be homework involved, there's going to be practice tests, and that's really how you build your score. These practice tests that you've taken are amazing. There's going to be further practice tests in all the classes that your school is providing, and I think those are a really important way for students to see how they're doing and try to gauge their improvement and really determine where they need to spend their study time. One big tip, big mistake made in standardized test prep is students like to focus on their biggest weakness. One of the best things you actually can do is try to enhance your strengths. So if you have a 600 on the SAT math portion, you probably could push that to 700 plus if you really study. Whereas if you're really struggling with the math portion, you definitely need to address it, but it's going to be a longer effort. And that brings me to my next point. When it comes to standardized test prep, another piece of advice, slow and steady wins the race. Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was a standardized test score. If you chip away at it over time, you do classes, you do a bit of studying, you do your practice tests, and you really keep chipping away at it, you will be successful. Most students do take the SAT or ACT multiple times because of what's called super scoring. Basically, super scoring enables you to take your best score in English and math on the SAT and put the 2 together. Let's say you get a 700 on math and a 500 on English the first time you take the SAT. If you retake it and you get a 500 on math and a 700 on English the second time, both times you've scored a 1200 on the SAT, but your super score will be the 2 700s and you will have a 1400. Works as well on the ACT. This is hugely important, and that's why many students do take the test 2 or 3 times. If you knock it out of the park the first time, we'll all be happy and that will be amazing, but many of us take it several times, myself included. Regardless of whether you take the SAT or ACT, understanding that specific test is extremely important. You really want to dig in and understand the ins and outs of that one test. That's how you get your highest score. I personally didn't start with the highest SAT score when I started, but I ended up with a 99th percentile SAT score because I understood how the test worked and I really honed in on the strategies and how to take the test. I really understood what I was doing. I had a plan of action for each section of the test, and I went in there extremely prepared. You can do the same thing. All of you will be successful. I know you can do this. You can definitely improve your score on either the SAT or ACT. Try to make that decision for yourself. Think about it. If you need some help, you have a question, you can speak with your guidance counselor, you speak with your guidance staff at your school. You also could shoot us an email. I'm happy to look over your results and give you some advice as to which test is better for you. So in conclusion, the two biggest differences between the tests: number one, time management. If you move quickly, you might like the ACT. If you like to have a little bit more time, you're more of a thinker, you might like the SAT. Secondarily, there is the math component: 50% math on the SAT, 25% math on the ACT. SAT more focus on algebra, ACT more focus on geometry. Take that and do what you will with it. If you need some advice, of course, reach out to us. We are happy to help you. Once again, the classes are starting soon, so check out those classes, and we're really excited to be working with all of you. I hope it all goes well. I know it will. Do the best you can. It's a tough process, but you can make it through. I'll see all of you soon. Have a great one.